I want to get back to the Conservative leadership race. Did you know over half of Conservative members have voted for a new leader 1 week before the deadline? The party says just over 350,000 ballots have been received from people who are eligible to vote. And there's 1 week left before the deadline coming up on September the 6th. Wow, we're almost into September. Labor Day is coming. Laura Kurkimaki is on the line right now, principal at Earnscliffe Strategies and former principal secretary to Erin O'Toole. Thank you for coming on the show, Laura.
Thank you so much for having me.
What does that say to you?
Well, it shows that there's a lot of interest in the party. It's impressive that we're already over 50% turnout. In the last 2 races, in 2017, it was around 55%, and then in 2020, it was about 65%. So with a week to go, I'm sure the numbers will just keep climbing.
Is this just in the bag for frontrunner Pierre Poilievre? What do you think?
Yes. I think
Succinctly, yes?
Simply, yes. I really believe that is the case. He's long been a very popular member of Parliament with our caucus and our membership. And they say that they've sold over 300,000 memberships, which is just absolutely unheard of. In the last race, the total amount of eligible members was only 270,000, and obviously this has broken a lot of records. So I think we're going to see a pretty decisive first ballot victory.
I try and think back and reflect on the leadership race to think of any pivotal moments. There was Patrick Brown being disqualified. Mm-hmm. There were debates. Were there any other moments or any moments within those, like in one of the 3 official debates, that you thought that was a really big turning point?
Not so much. I do think that maybe how the percentages break down with Patrick being out of the race. His campaign was the only other campaign that released a figure of memberships they sold. Their team said they sold around 150,000 memberships, which is still quite substantial, if that is accurate. So with him out of the race, it was more substantial than anything else that had sort of happened in the race thus far. I think at the beginning it was interesting, obviously, having former Premier Jean Charest in the race, just because it was someone that hadn't been involved previously in recent years anyway. So it was sort of a big name entering the race. But I think, outside of Quebec, it remains to be seen how well he'll do in terms of connecting with recent members of the party. So I would say there hasn't really been one big moment. Patrick leaving the race was probably the most substantial, but I don't think it necessarily is changing the outcome at all.
So poised to become the next leader of the party, the one thing people point out a lot about Pierre Poilievre is that he's able to bring the younger people into the Conservative umbrella, that he's been engaging with them and that he's getting them excited about being part of the party. What do you think that it is? And what do you think him becoming the next leader, or it looks like he's going to become the next leader, means for the future of the party?
Yeah, I think it's a really good sign that it seems like he's been able to attract a lot of younger voters. I think there was a poll recently that showed that younger folks were more inclined to vote Conservative, which is the first time that I can remember that happening in any recent years anyways. So I think that's really exciting. Obviously, he has a very strong social media game going on, and he oftentimes sort of skirts around the traditional media to talk directly to Canadians. He has a very large following. He's also, using YouTube and other things that seem to have a substantial younger following. So I think that that's a really great sign and a sort of an interesting component that at least wasn't sort of a main demographic involved in our voter coalition recently.
I want to talk about the different perspectives of Pierre Poilievre, okay? And I want to be clear here, because anytime you raise criticism of whatever political figure you're going to raise criticism of, people go, you're just trying to undermine that person's success. No, let's be objective here. And I hear both perspectives of Pierre Poilievre. I hear people writing in and saying, I love this guy. He understands the plight of the everyday person. He gets how hard it is for me and my family to keep up with inflation. And he's the only person who feels like that I'm being heard, okay? Now, on the other side of this, Laura, you know where I'm going. There are people who are concerned that he's taking the party in the wrong direction, that he's bringing in the wrong people. We are in a very politically charged environment right now. People are angry, and we saw an angry man confronting the Deputy Prime Minister, Chrystia Freeland, calling her a traitor. Pierre Poilievre came out and condemned that. The Prime Minister came out. But critics have accused Pierre Poilievre of stoking this politically charged environment and political anger through some of his rhetoric and through, for example, his criticism of a journalist like Rachel Gilmore from Global. Do you think that he is?
Listen, I think that you're right in terms of how you were sort of characterizing the political environment right now. I think we have seen a lot of anger in recent years. That actually started a lot prior to the pandemic, but sort of has been exacerbated since then. And I think people feel very, very strongly. And I think sort of there's different politicians on all sides, including, the Liberals and the Prime Minister, who really did politicize COVID and a lot of the things around that were brought into sort of the public sphere. So listen, I think Pierre is, the type of guy who there are a lot of people who feel really strongly, sort of one side or the other. But he is, I think, to what you were sort of saying about some of the folks that wrote in, who think that he truly, really understands them. I think how he's communicating is very, very effective. He sort of speaks to people at their level. He doesn't come across, condescending to just regular people who are, sitting around their kitchen table and talking about how they need to, reduce the amount that they, spend in groceries and things that really matter to them because of how expensive everything has gotten. So I think it will be really interesting to see sort of how the tone goes, after the leadership. I think that's sort of what people might have an issue with so far. But I mean, it's going to be quite something to see, depending on the sort of decisive victory in September. But we'll see if he continues down the path that he's on right now, hitting on economic issues and all that sort of stuff, or not.
Yeah, after the Chrystia Freeland incident, he came out, he said, my wife has received horrific material directly to her social media account that a private security firm had to intervene in. Obviously, nobody of anybody, party or anybody on the political spectrum should be having to hire a private security firm because they're facing that type of material. But do you think he needs to go beyond that? Do you think there needs to be more of a message from all political leaders or would-be leaders right now?
Yeah, it's absolutely obviously terrible that they have had to do that. I know a lot of, especially for, political spouses and family members, they sort of sign up for this, but, they don't sign up for that sort of abuse. And obviously what happened to Minister Freeland is also, completely unacceptable. And it was good to see him obviously come out and kind of share some of his experiences as well. And it's been very, actually, shockingly too common amongst, a lot of MPs, at least that I've chatted with over the last number of years. It's been rising and rising. And, people on social media sort of feel like they're not accountable. They can just sort of be behind, a keyboard and, they don't often, except for what we saw recently, sort of bring it to the next level. So I think, with a lot of the politicians and former politicians that have come out, and this is sort of being talked about, I think, as well in the Quebec election, some of them, I believe, have been having security there. So I think this might be a topic we hear a little bit more about. And I'm sure, after he wins and is leader, he'll come out every time something like that sort of happens. But I think, it is something that regular folks don't maybe necessarily realize is kind of affecting people in public life as much as, does.
Yeah, and from my colleague CTV Montreal, they were talking about heightened security, as you mentioned, in Quebec. Bulletproof vests, as they've been fanning out across the province, campaigning ahead of their October 3rd election. Thanks so much for the time on this. Appreciate you hopping on the show.
Oh, no problem. Thank you so much for having me.